So thank you for visiting my channel. I am Professor Alex Hernandez, and today we're just going to spend a couple of minutes going over the bankruptcy exemptions in Connecticut. Now, of course, if you come across this video and you're not in Connecticut, please make sure to visit my website, bankruptcy.blog, where I have most of the states up. It's kind of time consuming, so I'm sorry I haven't gotten to all of them, but I'll get there where I'm listing all the information. Now, the information I'm listing, you'll see here. You'll see that in the description below, you'll see you have access to my website, and it's going to have information, not only the contact information for the trustees in your area, but also the bankruptcy court system. And there's a blog giving examples basically of what I'm going over today. Now, let's look over some statistics, because when I see statistics like this means that there's more protections, let's say, for debtors. And it's important to understand what exemptions are. Exemptions are the fancy legal term basically for protected. So we're going to go over those protections now. But when I see that there are that many more Chapter 7 cases filed in Chapter 13, that's always a sign for me that there's protections for debtors. And typically it's going to be a protection for the home. It's going to be at a certain amount, which allows individuals to file Chapter 7 instead of Chapter 13. Now, of course, you can go on my blog and see the difference between Chapter 7 and 13. I do have videos as well regarding that issue. Now, before we start with anything else, we need to comply with this, the 730 and 180-day rule. What does that mean? Well, just because you're living in Connecticut doesn't mean we're going to use the exemptions of Connecticut. You have to be there X amount of time. Now, let's start off with the basics. Suppose you're in New York and you left New York and now you moved to Connecticut. How long have you been in Connecticut? You have to be at least 91 days out of the most. So let's say 91 days in a row too. It's not like you're going back and forth. After basically that 91-day period, you can go ahead and file for bankruptcy in Connecticut. But now comes the issue of, well, you just moved to Connecticut. You're using Connecticut laws, right? Connecticut exemptions? No. And that's one of the unique things about bankruptcy. You might have to use the exemptions of another state if you haven't complied with those residency rules. In this case, you have to live in Connecticut 730 days before you start using their exemptions. Why is that important? Because whether you're moving into Connecticut or you're leaving Connecticut, the issue is you have to look at the exemptions and say which one favor me the most. Now, I'm in Florida, born and raised here, and our exemptions for homes are it's unlimited. So if you're facing a situation, whether it's Connecticut or another state, and you know you're moving to Florida, but you have all this equity in your home, and when you buy a new home, using all that money towards the down payment, then the question is, when am I going to file? Is my state going to protect the equity in this home? If the answer is no, then you have to wait 730 days to then take advantage of the exemptions of Florida with the unlimited homestead exemption. So keep that in mind. Whether you're moving to or from, you have to figure out first which is to my advantage and then work around that. Okay. Now, the homestead exemption, and I've been putting this on several blogs. Now that I'm going through all the different states and I'm looking through the exemptions, I'll find one exemption that says, yeah, and I'll make up a state, 150, 175. Another one says 250. I'm like, okay, it can't be 250 on all of the, everybody can't be right. So you have to do research, research, research. I use a software program designed for bankruptcy, so I know what the numbers are, but you really have to dig deep sometimes. I would recommend just look it up with 5 different sources and see if there's any contradictions with any. And unfortunately, I've even seen where the state statutes are wrong on the exemptions. For whatever reason, no one's gotten around to it, but it's like, okay, your statutes are wrong. If anything, as a law professor, we always say, just look at the statutes, look at the statutes. And here we are with the statutes being wrong. So please do your research endlessly. I'm not talking about depending on AI, because I catch AI wrong all the time as well. So be careful, because if you put down the wrong amounts, it's going to affect your bankruptcy case. You might think you're protected and then find out that you're not. Now, how do exemptions work? It's simple enough. You see it here with the examples. What I did here was I got the average sale price or the average value of a home in Connecticut, and then I subtract it. So this is the value, and then this is the average mortgage, $252,000. When you subtract those numbers, what you have is your equity amount. And so in this case, getting the average mortgage balance and the average value of a home in Connecticut equals $154,886. Now, pretend those are your numbers. Does that mean your home is protected? Yeah, because look at the numbers here. $250,000 is protected. You almost have another $100,000. What do you have? 95,000, let's say, and change. So you have 95,000, almost $100,000 more to go in equity. So those are definitely your home is going to be protected. Now, not every state does this. I think off the top of my head, I could be wrong. I think it's 18 states that do allow federal exemptions as well. Most states do not, clearly. If that happens, again, you have to look at this and say, which is to my benefit? The federal exemptions for homes are much less. But if you don't own a home, maybe you need an exemption somewhere else that's more protective of your assets. So look into it. Do your research. If you hire a lawyer, of course, your lawyer will take care of this. But if you're filing on your own, you have to figure out, is this going to protect me? Is this what's best for me? And then it goes back to that 730 and 180-day rule to figure out, am I moving to a new state and now using federal exemptions? Again, remember, bankruptcies, you don't get to get arrested, let's say in Connecticut, say, I don't like Connecticut laws on arrest, I want to use the Florida laws, they seem to be that better. Bankruptcy is the exception to the rule, where you might be applying the laws of other states. Now, when we're dealing with the issue of exemptions, exemptions cover a lot. I only touch upon those issues here. I pick some of the most important ones. For example, and I like to make the comparisons with Florida. This is protected: furniture and clothing, etc. Anything that you need for daily living, as you see there. I like that because in Florida, your clothes are just nothing but another asset, personal property. And while, of course, use clothing and shoes, how much is that going to get you? It's not a lot of money. And the same thing for furniture. $1,000 sofa is not $1,000 sofa 6 months from now, but it's good to see that you don't have to include that, unlike I do when I'm, filing in Florida. And this is another big one for me. Bureau plots are exempt. In Florida, this is just another asset. It's actually real estate. And the issue with that is simple. If you're 40 years old and you paid off your plot, you'll be okay. The problem is when you're 70 something and you're on a limited budget, and now they tell you in Florida you're going to lose, your cemetery plot. And of course, I've had situations where the client's spouse died, and they're saying, so why would they want my spot next to my husband's? It doesn't matter. There's a market for everything. Trustee is going to get that, sell it. Someone's going to buy it. And when they get those funds, what they do is, since those funds are not protected, then they use that to pay off the creditors a pro rata share. The problem, if you face that problem, then the answer is you have to file Chapter 13 and pay that back if you can't afford to pay that back within a 10 to 12 month period when it comes to bankruptcy. So it's good that plots are protected. This is a necessity. It's not something you worry about when you're 30, but when you're 70, you're going to be thinking, I've been paying this off for all these years for the trustee to take it from me. In Florida, yes. In Connecticut, you're good to go. Cars, of course, cars are always going to have exemptions. The exemptions here are pretty high for 7,000. Florida was bad. Florida was 1,000, and I think last year exactly is when they raised it up to 5,000. But cars, the good news is cars, they lose value so quickly that, whatever the amount is, I mean, 1,000 is extremely low, like Florida. But it all balances out, right? Florida gives you unlimited homestead exemption, but then it would kind of screw you over on the car. But as you see here, 7K, that's good. The chances that your car has 7,000 in equity, even if it did, let's say you have 10,000 in equity and you're protected 7,000 right off the top. So you only have to worry about paying back $3,000 somehow. So that's a good thing. And now, tools of the trade, I'll put that in the description so you can get more information on that. Tools of the trade is important. The problem is it's not really protecting you in Connecticut, but tools of the trade is another way to protect business assets. So, I always like to use the example of landscapers because they have so much equipment, and a sit down mower can be 10 grand. When you have that in Florida, what's your protection? Nothing. It's just part of personal property, and a landscaper can get hit pretty hard with all the assets of the business. This doesn't include, bank accounts and everything else, because that's also a business asset. So you can get hit hard. Some states have a tools of the trade exception. So it says anything related to your business, you're protected X amount of dollars. The problem is, as you can see here, Connecticut is only focusing on farm related equipment. So for all of you that are like me, self-employed, the tools of the trade exemption is really not going to work for you. It has to be farm related. And then at that point, you're going to have some protection. Everyone else, dentists, landscapers, etc., they're going to feel the pinch and have to pay back that as some sort of a personal property. Okay, so I'm done with this. This is just to give you a quick idea of how the exemptions work. If you're a paralegal legal studies student, remember you also can watch my videos that goes over each chapter in my textbook. Always feel free to post comments in the comment section of my videos. Make sure you look at the description. I am gonna put a couple links there. And remember, more importantly, you're going to have access to the trustee information, phone numbers, everything else, bankruptcy court, as well as further examples of how exemptions work. Okay, so take care of yourselves. Make sure you do research to make sure that those numbers are correct when it comes to the exemptions. Best of luck to all of you working on your bankruptcy case.